Hi everyone. Today video is on .NET 6 Web API CRUD operation with MongoDB as a backend. So what is MongoDB? MongoDB is a source available cross-platform document-oriented database. Okay, MongoDB simply called as NoSQL database or a non-relational database. In MongoDB, collections are equivalent to the tables in SQL database. In SQL database, we generally call tables, right? In MongoDB, we call them as collection. In MongoDB, data is stored as document that is equivalent to the table records in the SQL database. Okay. So in MongoDB, collections will contain documents. So document contains JSON data, okay, that can be stored as by BSON format. So BSON is a binary JSON format. Okay. So let's jump into creating a small demo on to communicating the web API with the MongoDB as a backend. For this demo, I am using Docker container MongoDB as a my database. Okay. So here my MongoDB database image container running. Okay. And here I am using Visual Studio Code as a my IDE for interacting with the MongoDB. Here I have database like my old and my collection, nothing but a table is called person. Okay, this query will fetches the some data from the my person collection. So this is my data. I have added some dummy data into my person collection. See here, you can observe like a JSON format. Each object is a one document. Okay, you want here you can observe. Here is my old DB and person is the collection and it contains four documents. Each document is a JSON format. Okay. So how to create a Docker container for MongoDB and how to interact the MongoDB from the Visual Studio code editor. I have already made a video and link to this video will be available in the description. If you want, you can check over there. Okay, first let's create a .NET 6 Web API application. Okay, here I am using .NET CLI for creating the API project. So the command is .NET space new space web API space -o space name of your project. So let's create the web API project. Project is created successfully. Let me open my project in Visual Studio Code Editor. So here is our .NET 6 project. Okay. Now first step, let's install the MongoDB NuGet package. Okay. So the package we have to install is MongoDB.driver. Copy, install the package. Okay. After installing the package, let's add some configuration settings regarding the MongoDB in our app setting.development.json. Okay. Name it like MongoDB settings. Okay. It contains connection string and database name. Okay, so how to frame the connection string for the MongoDB? So to frame the connection string, so default keyword like MongoDB colon and double slash and your MongoDB URL. So what is my MongoDB URL? Localhost colon 8007 is my MongoDB URL. So let's add it here. Okay, that will be my MongoDB connection string and my database name. I have already shown, right? I have created a database and the collection. So my database is my old. See here, my database. Okay, copy that here. Okay, now let's create a model for these settings so that we can easily access them into our application. Okay, let's create a folder like models. In that, let's create a class with this name itself. Okay, MongoDB settings.cs. So into this class, let's add the properties that are equivalent to the settings in this object. Okay. Go to program.cs file. We have already installed the MongoDB driver package, right? Now let's register the iMongo database in the program.cs file. Okay. So to do that, the dot services dot, I'm going to register this at singleton. Okay, one-time creation once the application is started. So it is iMongo database. Okay, it loads from MongoDB.driver. Now let's load the MongoDB settings by mapping the JSON settings with this entity. Okay, so let's add like Mongo settings, get section, and define the name, that is MongoDB, right? MongoDB settings. So pass it over here and dot get of type. Here you can specify MongoDB settings. Okay. Now this variable is of type MongoDB settings. Okay. First, let's initialize the Mongo client. And to this Mongo client, we need to pass the connection string of our MongoDB. Okay. From this MongoDB, from this client instance, we have to create our database. Okay. So that can be written from here. Means we are creating the instance of iMongo database. Okay. So client dot get database. Here we can pass the name of my database. So I have already stored in settings, right? Database name, pass it. So finally, we are register our iMongo database instance as a singleton in the program.cs file. Okay. And I have already shown you my collection, right? Here is my documents. So what is my collection? Person. Okay. Collection is nothing but a, you can treat it like a table. Okay. So its structure is like this. So first we have to create a entity for our collection, person collection. Okay. So let's create the entity. Create a folder like collections. Okay. Inside of it, create entity for the collection. Okay. So now this is our person collection and it should contain property that are matched with the document property. Okay. So here is ID little different, right? But we can call ID directly by decorating some attributes on it that are derived from the MongoDB NuGet package. Okay. Okay. These are the properties of my collection. And if you see ID here and in the MongoDB, it is like a object, right? So to make here it is a primary key. And to make it here primary key that will understand by the MongoDB NuGet library, we should decorate with reason ID attribute. Okay. That flows from MongoDB serialization attribute. Okay. And one more thing here you can observe, ID is not directly accessible. It is resides inside of the some object. Instead of having an object like this, here we want to access it directly as a ID property. And it is some random string, right? And its type should be string, not an object. Sorry, here small correction, it should be string. I want to read it like a string. For that, we need to decorate with one more attribute, that is like reason representation and reason type dot object ID. So what it will do means whenever it's going to interact with, it will, if we are fetching the data from the MongoDB, it will read as a string. Okay, instead of basin object ID. This is basin object. This is basin object. Instead of retrieving as a basin object, it will convert it as a string. And here we can observe one more thing, that our documentation properties are small case. But in C sharp, it's we will use like uppercase, right? Starting letter. So to map them, we have to decorate each property like there is an attribute like basin element, and here we have to give the property name of our original document name. Okay, we'll do for all. Okay, these are the names of the original MongoDB documentation names. Okay, that is how our collection entity look like. Okay, now let's create a person repository where we are going to write our all MongoDB communication methods inside of it. Okay, let me create a folder like repository, and let's create a interface like iPerson repository. Okay, in this repository we are going to define our method definitions, and let's create implementation of our repository. Okay, this is our implementation class person repository, and in program.cs file we have registered the iMongo database, right? Let's inject the iMongo database into the constructor of this person repository. Okay, now let's create a iMongo collection variable, okay, for our person collection, so that we can interact with the this collection of our MongoDB. Okay, for that we can declare a variable like iMongo collection, and here type we have to define. We have already defined the entity for our collection, right? That is people. So here define it. Okay, sorry, it is person, right? Now let's initialize the collection inside of the constructor. So Mongo person collection equal to Mongo database dot get collection. Okay, and here I can specify type of the collection, and here we have to pass the name of the collection. Okay, so so my name of the collection is personalized. Copy from here. It is small case, right? So same name. I'm going to copy paste over here. Okay. Now inherit my person repository, and let's register our person repository in the program.cs file. Build a service. I'm going to register it singleton. It's live scope. Okay. Okay. And now let's create a controller for our demo. So go to controllers and let me create a controller like person controller. So here is our person controller. As a first step, let's inject our iPerson repository into its constructor. Okay. Now let's start creating the endpoints. Okay. So first step is I have all. So I have already have some dummy document data in my MongoDB. So as a first step, I want to read them. Okay. Let's do first read operation. First, let's go to our person repository. Let's write a method for fetching the data from the MongoDB. Okay, let me create a method like okay, this is my method that's going to return all the documents from the MongoDB. Okay, so now what I will do, return await. I am going to use my Mongo person collection and here I have a method like find. Okay, so this find will filter the documents. If at all to this find, if we simply pass a predicate like boolean true, okay, and to list async, that means if a find function, if you simply pass a true value as a predicate, then it's going to return all the documents from the MongoDB collection. Okay, so that's it. Very simple. And this method is an extension from the iMongoDB driver NuGet package. You can go to definition and you can observe it. Okay, and now let's add the method definition into our iPerson repository. And now let's create a action method for reading all the data from the MongoDB. Here my action method is get. This will fetch all the documents from the database and it should be decorated with HTTP get. Okay, and if at all, if we follow the convention of our API like get, if we have single get method and that is HTTP get method, then we no need to define the route. Okay, if we have multiple get methods, then we have to define your route explicitly. Okay, and here I'm going to get the person data by person repository get all async and it should be awaited. And if I got a collection, I can return okay, that is a 200 status code. To that we can pass our person data. Okay, so that's it. That's simple our action method for returning the collection of documents from our MongoDB. And in our settings, I have small correction here. It is local host. Okay, some spelling mistake. So now let's run our test our endpoint. So here is our Swagger and here is our get person endpoint. So let's test this endpoint. See, our documents are fetched from or written from our API. Okay, and now let's do create operation, inserting new record into the database. For that, let's create a new method like, so this is my new method. Here what I can do, return await iMongo collection dot insert one async. This is going to insert the single record into the collection. Okay, and here we are going to pass our new record. So person person. Okay, and let's add this method definition. So it is void method only. So this add this method definition into our iPerson repository. Okay, now let's define our endpoint or action method to save the new document into the MongoDB collection. And it should be decorated with HTTP post, and so it is following the convention. So I have only single post method, right? So I'm not defining any explicitly route here, and it should contain a payload. Okay. Now here we have to call our person repository and create new async and new person. Okay. So now on creating a new record, it is recommended to return the a endpoint to fetch the item by ID, newly created ID. Okay, that means we have to create one more get action method that's going to filter by the ID of the document. Okay, so for that, let's create one more method here uh, to fetch the record by ID. Okay, let me create a method like, okay, my method look like this, getting the single record based on the ID value. Okay, now here we can filter like return MongoDB collection, and here we can use find method again. Okay, and to this find we can now filter the property where ID equal to ID dot first dot default is, and it should be awaited. And let's add this method into our iPerson repository. And now in the controller, let's create a one more get action method. Okay, here we can observe our action method is a overloaded method, and I have already defined if we have one more than one method, then we should explicitly define the route. So HTTP get web should be registered, and here route I will register like, so braces means that is dynamic value of the route. Okay, this value will be added here. Okay, and now here what I can do, get my person and get by ID async method, simply return okay. Okay, now come back to our save action method. Okay, so here I can use one default return type method like create at action. To this, first parameter will be the name of the action method. So name is get only, right? And it has properties, right? What are the route values? It have ID. So ID equal to, I can get my new person ID. Okay, and simply returns the my saved object as a response. So what it will do? It will return 201 created as a status code, and it will generate a route for this action method. Okay, for this action method, it will create a route by adding the ID of the newly created document. So that route will be returned to the response like a one of the header. Okay. Now let's save and test the create operation. And here you can see now we are seeing three endpoints of our person controller, and here is the route for second get endpoint. So here what I want to do, I want to insert the new record, right? So let's try to create new one. Okay, let's create the new record. And here you can see 201 created and response. and you can see ID value. That means document is successfully inserted into the person collection. And here you can see response header. In the response header, we got the endpoint URL. That is our new get endpoint URL. If I copy, I can directly access that endpoint. So this value will be helpful for the when you have UI page. Okay. And next operation we are going to do is update operation. Okay. So for update operation, first go to our person repository. Okay. So let me create a method for my update operation. Okay, this is my method. So here what I will do, return await iMongo collection. iMongo collection is very helpful library. It contains all the default methods, just like our NT framework for the storing with for interacting with the SQL database. MongoDB driver also very helpful. So here we have a method like replace one async, and to this method, so first we have to filter the object document which we want to update. Okay. And to this method, we have to pass the our entire updated object. So what it will do, first it will identify the document with the ID and then update with the new data. Okay, it is a void method. Okay, now let's define the method definition here. Okay, and now let's create the update action method. So this is my action method, and for update we can decorate like HTTP put attribute here. And next, since we are updating, right, instead of directly updating, it is always good whether the data or the document is exist in the DB or not. For that, what we will do, uh, person equal to a person repository. We have a method get by async, right? We will going to use that method here as well. Okay, and here we are going to pass the ID. So we will check whether the document is existed or not. If at all the document is not exist, then we will return the response like not found. Okay. So if the document exists, we simply call our method to update our document, and we can simply return no content as a response. Okay. That's going to create the 204 status code. Okay. Now let's run our endpoint and test our endpoint. Okay. Here is our put endpoint for updating the record. So first let's get me one record, one document, existing document. Okay. So what I will do, I am going to update the newly created document, copy that document and go to our put. Okay, for update, ID value is the key because based on that key, document will be searched and updated. Okay, what I will do, I will just update some data here. Okay, some phone number change. Okay, number right. Okay, now let's update the record. So I have changed name, I have changed some phone number. So let me change age also, update it. And here we got 204 response. That means no content. That means successfully updated. If you want to confirm it, okay, we can use our endpoint, get endpoint. And if you go to here, see here, name, age, and phone number are updated as per our information. Okay, so that's the end of the story of update operation. And final operation, that is delete operation. So first let's create a method for the delete operation in our person repository. Okay, so this is my method for deleting the record. So here we are going to use MongoDB collection and delete one async. Okay, we are saying to delete the particular ID, sorry, particular document by the ID. Okay, what it will do, it will search the document ID, document by ID, and deletes that document. Okay, so let's define the definition as well. And now let's create the delete endpoint action method. So this is my delete action method. It should be decorated with HTTP delete. Okay, and before directly deleting the document from the record, let's do a verification like whether the document is exist or not. If not exist, we will return like no content, and if at all exist, then we will invoke our delete method. Okay, ID, and finally after deleting we return like no content. Okay, and here it should be simply ID. Okay, that is our delete action method. Now let's run it and test the endpoint. So here is our delete endpoint. So first let's get the ID, document ID. So I will delete the newly created record. Okay. So what I will do, I will pass it over for delete operation. Okay, execute. And it return 204 no content. That means delete successful. And if I rerun my API, I won't see this Hemant Kumar record. Okay. So execute again. And here you can see there is no record for Hemant Kumar. That means it is deleted successfully. Okay. So that's all about the .NET 6 API CRUD operations using MongoDB as a backend. I hope this video has delivered some useful information to you all. If you like my video, please support me by subscribing to my channel. Soon we are going to meet with new videos. Until then, signing off.